We've tried to emphasize before that if you can double your speed, you quadruple your energy. I've emphasized that so that you understand speed really matters. That's why bullets are so deadly. If I took a bullet out of a gun, I threw it at you, it's not going to do much. But it's the velocity that it's shot out of the gun. That's what makes it so deadly. Okay, speed matters. But that doesn't mean neglect mass. And in our training, what we're really talking about, what we're really concerned with is essentially something we call the effective mass. See, you're not going to always hit, you can't hit with your whole body unless you jump and you throw yourself into the person. You know, you're doing like a football tackle. You're not hitting with your whole body when you throw a punch. But you're not just hitting necessarily with the isolated mass of your arm. So our goal is to maximize this. How can we increase the mass that we put in motion? And so we should begin our discussion tonight to understand this idea. We should begin our discussion with a brief analysis of motion. All motion, you're already familiar with this. All motion is composed of two parts. And those two parts are lines and circles. Put another way, we explore within our techniques linear or circular motion. And what we're concerning ourselves with today is not so much the energy, but if we're putting mass in motion, we want to maximize something we call our momentum. We want to maximize our body momentum. And there's different ways that you can do that. There's different movements or actions that you can perform. So now we understand that there's both linear and circular motion, and now we're going to explore motion on two fundamental planes. So we have all motion is composed of two parts, lines and circles, and we also have, for our analysis today, we have two fundamental planes of motion that we're going to work with. And that is a horizontal plane of motion and a, what is it? What's the other one? Yeah, vertical. Just making sure you guys are awake and paying attention. A vertical plane. Okay? And when we analyze our movement, our body's movement through these two planes, we can derive several basic body actions or body movements that we can perform to enhance the effectiveness of our technique. And so in no particular order, if you guys have learned this lesson before, we might have gone through it in a different order. And if I teach it in another couple of months, another 6 months or a year, we might end up addressing it in a slightly different order. All of these need to be covered. There's 5 basic actions that we're going to look at. Then there's one action that's a little bit more advanced, a 6th action we might discuss today. And then after that, instead of just looking at the body moving through space, then we start to explore how we can move the body, not as a solid unit, but through bowing and through whipping of the spine. Okay, so that's something for a different time. That's a little bit more advanced than this lesson is going to get into. Okay, so linear. Let's start with linear motion. Moving in a line. We're going to move our body in a line. And if we start in a horizontal plane of motion, well, what's the first body action then that we can look at and discuss? And it's one that we explore quite a bit. We'll look at shielding hammer to start and see this as an example. So moving in a horizontal plane in a linear fashion, that's something that we call projection or throwing. All right, so now we're going to get to work, and I'm going to show you a couple of examples of this, and I'm going to let you work on the techniques. Then we'll come back and I'll introduce you step by step the different body actions. So let me have Zach. And you guys can spread out, back up. Move over that way, actually. Yep, Tom, you can go over there. You guys, and some of you swing around at this angle so you can see. Okay, I'm going to come on this side. I'll have you come on this side. So projection. The reason it's called projection or throwing, you're going to throw your body in any direction on the horizontal plane. So this covers any linear movement of my body through space, forward or backwards, sideways, if I'm projecting my mass into the technique. or I'm throwing my body into the technique. That's what we mean when we say projection, by the way, like a projectile. I'm turning my body into a projectile. So if he does a roundhouse punch, I step back and we get our block. I'm going to hammer. There's some other body actions involved here. We'll address those in a minute. And now I'm going to collapse my elbow in as I close the gap. I can't reach him right now with this elbow strike, can I? So I need to close the gap, but I'm not just going to make that movement. It's not just a strategy so I can reach him. I want you to make that a strategy to maximize power as well. So when you're doing this technique, here's what you need to make sure you're not doing. You're not stepping and dragging your body behind. You're pushing off your back leg. We call it a push drag. So I hammer strike and then I push drag and I catch him with that elbow. Then from there we can finish with a hammer. We can kick out that leg if you want. Okay? So there's your first illustration of projection. He throws his punch, I block, I hammer across the head, I rake across the face. My elbow collapses in as my body projects forward behind it. We have a YouTube tip on this actually. You might have seen it and we might have discussed it in a class a couple months ago. Look at the elbow much the same way that the bumper of a car functions. When a car hits something, it causes a tremendous amount of damage. There's a lot of mass, and if there's more velocity, more momentum behind it, there's going to be even more damage. But it's not the bumper that's causing the damage. It's all the mass that's behind the bumper. So look at your elbow in this instance like the bumper. When I strike here, I collapse my elbow in, and this becomes attached to my body as I hit him, so that all my mass is behind that strike as I impact. Okay? Work on that one. Go ahead. Oh. Because we're looking at this technique, and it's just innately built within this technique, we're on the horizontal plane of motion. We looked at linear momentum. We can also look at angular or circular momentum to enhance this technique. And like I said, it's innately built within this technique. You're probably already doing it. So if we move in a circular fashion on a horizontal plane of motion, how do we do that? What body action? I'm doing it right now. Rotation. Okay, so that's your second action, and that will increase the momentum behind this technique. At what point? Let me have you over here. Okay, and we'll change sides because I'll get a better view of that. Throw your punch again. So at this point here, from my block, I'm not just throwing my arm. I'm moving this arm down just so it's not in the way, so you guys can see. I want, as my body moves, that projects my arm forward into that hammer strike. See, my body's rotating, and that's connected to me. Now, basic way, we're just going to project forward, and we can collapse the elbow here for this next strike. You can bring a little bit of rotation into that as well if you want. See, my arm's attached to my body, isn't it? So if I rotate and then let this travel in a circular orbit, we can enhance the power. And if you know an advanced body action, you can incorporate shaking or trembling. That's beyond the scope of this lesson. That's a little more sophisticated. But it is another body action, okay? Shaking power. We were looking at it recently. Throw a punch with this hand in it. So here, let's just keep things simple today. I hammer, but engage the waist on this strike. Then you can collapse the elbow or just use basic rotation. Let this follow a circular path and then rotate back in as you project into your opponent. All right, what do we have so far? We looked at this technique. Quick summation since we lost our microphone in the last shot. We started here, block, hammer strike, and now we incorporated rotation in that. I told you, you've seen it, we can do shaking power. We're just not going to do it today. But even without shaking of the waist, this is on a circular orbit. So I continue on that orbit, and then I let the elbow collapse. And as it collapses, I can rotate back into the elbow as I project forward. And that's going to greatly increase the momentum because now we have a compound body action. We're combining body actions. These are not isolated movements. That doesn't mean every action we're going to go over tonight can be combined. Sometimes you might be doing one mechanism of manifesting power, and if you try to incorporate an additional mechanism, it could work against the other one. Okay, they could work against each other, so you want to be careful of that. And most often, though, you can combine different body actions and further enhance the momentum. And if we're working on that technique, we should also work on this technique, which is a roundhouse punch. But now I'm stepping to the inside, block, back fist, instead of outward block, inward strike, inward block, outward strike. I can use the waist to rotate again to get the arm, send it into orbit as it travels back. Now, if he's turning to keep fighting, he's turning right into this elbow. And then you could come up and catch him with another elbow, and so forth and so on. There's all different things that you can do. But these two techniques utilize the same mechanisms of manifesting power. So continue to work on both of those, and then we're going to move on to another body action. I want to get through the first 5 actions because you should all be familiar with them and make sure you're using them when you're doing your techniques. Okay, so back to work on those for just a couple minutes, and then I'll beat up on Zach some more. It'll be great. All right, go ahead. All right, I think we're familiar with those techniques and those actions, so let's move on. And I will leave this up at the end, so you guys should grab your notebooks and write it down. I know you don't have your notebooks now, but this breakdown should help. Have you ever tried to rethink exactly what all the body actions are before, and sometimes you're like, oh, I can't remember one of them? So I'm trying to break it down in a way that you can really understand it. If we understand motion and momentum, by the way, I should have written this down for you. This is momentum, okay? Momentum in physics, momentum is written with a P. It's also a vector. We don't need to get into that, okay? We're more concerned with bringing mass into motion. So this is mass times speed, okay, is momentum. And there's 2 types that we're concerned with, linear and angular. In Kempo, we refer to it as body momentum. And now we're exploring body momentum in terms of moving mass through space on 2 different planes of motion, horizontal and vertical, and the 2 different types of momentum that we have, because there's 2 components to all motion, linear and circular. Okay, so now we've looked at here, we've looked at motion on the horizontal plane. We can project horizontally, that's linear, and we can rotate. Okay, now let's go to the vertical plane. Moving your mass in a linear fashion, but vertically up and down. There's 2 basic ways we can do that. What's one of them? Go ahead. Yeah, you can rise underneath a strike, and you can also drop your height to drop your mass down with the strike. Let's start with dropping. That's easier. You see that more often in your techniques, dropping. So let's look at delayed sword. Okay, I have Zach here again. He's grabbing a hold. I'm going to pin check, and I'm going to step back and stretch him out to try to put his weight on that lead leg. I'm going to strike into the arm, okay? Now, from here, I'm kicking him in the groin, so if he was starting to step in, that'll check off his depth and break his height, and now we're dropping our height. In Kempo, it's called marriage of gravity. We're going to drop our height with that strike. So there's dropping. But let's break the technique down a little bit more because there's much more than that going on here. Grab a hold again. I pin check. I step back. What am I doing right now? What body action that we discussed? No, right now I am going to drop, but the major action here is it's a different body action. When I'm here, am I moving through space? How am I moving through space? Projection? Yeah, I'm projecting. This time I'm projecting backwards. A second ago, we were working on techniques where we were projecting forward. Some people will teach this technique, by the way. Yep, grab a hold. And they'll just step back like this, but look at what will happen. He'll stretch my shirt. He won't go anywhere. Some people don't do the pin check. But I want to pin because I want to take him with me. I want to project my mass backwards and really try to stretch him out. So there's projection. Now, I am dropping though. As I step, I want to solidify my base. And what else am I doing now? Say it.
Rotation.
Yeah, rotation. And all of that, not necessarily, it's not entirely simultaneously, but it is being blended together so that I'm rotating back and I'm projecting back. And then at the last second, as I land, I'm dropping my height. And all of these movements become married together. They become one. So we start here. Now I kick, and then I chop into the neck and drop my height. Okay, so there's delayed sword, giving you a little more insight into how to use your body to enhance the power behind the movements. Get back to work with your partner.